Karen Walters had never imagined her life would come to this. At 32, she was a single mother struggling to provide for her 10-year-old daughter, Lily. After a painful divorce 2 years earlier, Karen worked double shifts at a local diner and took on part-time cleaning jobs in the evenings. Every dollar was stretched, every hour of sleep was precious, and every decision she made was driven by survival. But deep down, she longed for companionship, someone to make her feel seen, wanted, and loved. That desire grew stronger with each passing day. It was during a late-night scroll through social media that Karen first connected with Zachary Kane. He was only 18, a high school dropout who said he had been misunderstood by the world. He told Karen she was beautiful, that she was strong, and that she deserved better. He listened when she vented, sent her good morning messages, and filled the empty spaces in her heart with attention she hadn't felt in years. It didn't take long for her to fall for the illusion he created. 3 weeks after their first online conversation, Zach moved into Karen's small 2-bedroom apartment. Neighbors whispered about the age gap, but Karen didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt alive. She told herself Zach just needed a second chance, a little guidance and structure. She believed that, with her help, he could turn things around. She saw potential where others saw red flags. But from the very beginning, something felt off to Lily. The little girl who once filled the apartment with her humming and laughter grew quiet. Zach never tried to bond with her. He seemed irritated by her presence, often ignoring her or giving her cold stares when Karen wasn't looking. At first, it was subtle. Then, it became unsettling. Lily stopped drawing pictures for her mom. She spent more time in her room. Her appetite faded, and her eyes lost their sparkle. Teachers at Lily's elementary school were the first to notice the changes. Her once bright personality was dimming. She rarely spoke in class, stopped raising her hand, and flinched when someone walked too close behind her. One of her teachers gently asked about the small bruises appearing on her arms. Lily said she fell while playing. No one pushed her for more. Zach began answering the home phone when the school called. He always had an excuse. Karen was sleeping. Karen was working. Karen didn't have time. Slowly, he positioned himself as the gatekeeper between Karen and the outside world, controlling what she heard and what she didn't. He made himself seem helpful, like he was protecting her from stress. Behind closed doors, Lily was not safe. Zach's mood shifted often, and his presence grew darker. Yet Karen, blinded by her desire to hold on to something, anything, ignored the gut feelings, the signs, and the silence. She convinced herself that Lily just needed time to adjust, that things would get better. But in truth, they were only just beginning to spiral. Lily's transformation was undeniable, but Karen struggled to see it. She was too caught up in her own world, clinging to the idea that Zach was a good person, that everything was fine. When the school counselor first reached out to Karen, her words felt like an inconvenient disruption to Karen's already chaotic routine. The counselor had mentioned Lily's bruises, asked if everything at home was okay. But Karen dismissed it as nothing more than playground accidents. Kids fall, she thought. It wasn't anything to worry about. She assured the counselor that Lily was just clumsy, that she was adjusting to living with Zach. Zach, ever the charmer, spoke on Karen's behalf when the counselor called again. He'd tell her that Karen was working late, that Lily was just going through a phase. He explained it away so convincingly that the counselor, though still concerned, felt there was no immediate danger. No one pushed for a deeper investigation. After all, it was just one report, and Lily wasn't speaking up. But the bruises didn't stop. They became more frequent, more visible, but they didn't seem to alarm Karen as much as they should have. It wasn't just the physical marks. It was Lily's behavior. She grew quieter by the day. At first it was subtle. She didn't join in on family meals, didn't laugh at the little jokes Zach made. But soon it was glaringly obvious. She would sit by herself for hours, eyes downcast, barely moving. She didn't want to play outside anymore, and her once vibrant drawings turned into dark, jagged lines that made no sense. The days went on, and Karen kept herself busy, focusing on work and keeping the household afloat. She noticed Lily's withdrawn state, but blamed it on typical preteen mood swings. What mother hadn't seen it? What mother hadn't dismissed it, thinking it would pass? She trusted Zach more than she had trusted anyone in years. She ignored the growing discomfort in her gut that told her something was wrong. One evening, after Karen came home late from a shift, she found Lily sitting on the porch steps in nothing but her pajamas, staring blankly into the darkness. It was freezing outside, and Lily's feet were bare. When Karen asked her what she was doing, Lily just stared, her eyes empty, her expression unreadable. Karen pulled her inside, but Lily didn't speak, didn't look up. She was almost lifeless. Karen tried to soothe her, asking if something had happened, but Lily's only response was a faint shake of her head. The next day, Karen made dinner, and Lily refused to eat. She simply pushed the food around her plate, her appetite completely gone. It was more than just a phase now. Karen could see it. Her daughter was no longer the bright, energetic little girl she had once been. She was a shell of herself. Concerned, Karen decided to call Child Protective Services, but before the caseworker could arrive, Zach intercepted. He was always quick with an excuse, always convincing. He told Karen that everything would be fine, that Lily just needed more attention. It was his soothing words, his promises that things would improve, that kept Karen from seeing the full picture. Zach's control over her had deepened, and despite everything, Karen believed him. In the days that followed, Karen became more isolated. She saw less and less of her daughter. She spent more hours at work, letting Zach handle the home front. But what she didn't know was that Lily, locked in her room at night, was becoming more and more terrified. And Zach, the man she trusted, was no longer the boy she thought he was. As the weeks passed, Lily's silence became more pronounced. The once chatty girl, full of questions and laughter, now only spoke when spoken to. Her pale face, sunken eyes, and hollow expression became a familiar sight. Karen barely noticed the shift. She continued to work long hours, exhausted, and trying to hold everything together. Zach, ever the reliable boyfriend, assured her that everything was under control at home. He'd tell Karen that Lily had just become difficult, that she was acting out because of the divorce. It was easier to believe that explanation than to face the mounting pile of suspicions creeping at the edges of her mind. Zach's behavior toward Lily grew colder and more controlling. He began to isolate her further. Lily was not allowed to have friends over, not even for the occasional playdate. Zach would scold her for the smallest things, leaving her shoes in the hallway, not making her bed to his satisfaction, or taking too long in the bathroom. Each reprimand, each harsh word, chipped away at Lily's spirit. But it wasn't just the words. It was the way Zach's presence made her feel small, invisible, and fearful. When Karen wasn't home, Zach's cruelty took on a darker form. Lily would sometimes come home from school to find her bedroom door locked, the light switched off. Zach would tell her she needed to think about her behavior in the dark, alone. He would force her to sit still for hours in complete silence. The isolation, the confinement, the biting words, these were not the actions of a loving father figure. But Karen didn't see it. To her, it seemed like Zach was just trying to teach her daughter discipline. Zach's discipline soon escalated to something more disturbing. He began to physically punish Lily, though it was subtle at first. A slap on the back of the head when she wasn't paying attention, a push to the shoulder when she made a mistake. It wasn't enough for Karen to notice, but it was enough to make Lily shrink further into herself. One day, Lily returned home from school to find her mother working a late shift again. Zach was home alone, and he was angry. Lily hadn't done anything wrong, but Zach was in one of his moods. He snapped at her for no reason at all, his temper flaring. He grabbed her arm tightly, digging his fingers into her skin, leaving marks. When she winced in pain, he pushed her against the wall, demanding she be quiet. The next morning, Karen didn't notice the red hand-shaped bruise on Lily's arm. It wasn't just the physical violence, it was the psychological torment. Zach would make Lily feel worthless, often calling her names when Karen wasn't around. He would tell her that her mother didn't love her enough to notice. He'd whisper to Lily that she was a burden on everyone, that she was lucky to have him around. These words, like the physical marks, dug deep into Lily's heart, making her believe the worst about herself. Lily's anxiety increased. She became a shadow of the bubbly girl she once was. She stopped talking to Karen about her day, stopped drawing, stopped asking questions. She stopped trying to play. She didn't want to make noise, didn't want to disturb the delicate balance between Zach and her mother. She didn't know how to ask for help because the one person she trusted most had her blinders on, focused only on keeping Zach happy. By now, Lily had learned to hide her pain. She learned that silence and submission were the safest paths. She grew used to the pain in her body, the terror in her mind, and the suffocating sense that no one could save her. What Karen didn't know, what no one knew, was that Lily was slowly being broken, not just by Zach, but by her own silence. The more she tried to bury her fears, the more she disappeared into herself. But what came next would shatter everything. In the secrecy of their home, things would escalate beyond the point of no return. The brutal truth would soon be impossible to ignore. But it was too late. The warning signs, the bruises, the whispers, all ignored for too long. And in the silence of that home, tragedy waited. The call came on a cold morning, just after sunrise. Karen had just returned from a long shift and was exhausted, leaning against the kitchen counter, trying to sip her coffee as her head spun with fatigue. The phone rang loudly, cutting through the silence of the house. It was the police. Lily. "Lily's not breathing." The officer's voice on the other end was steady, but there was something in it. A grim urgency that made Karen's heart skip a beat. Her mind raced, unable to fully comprehend the words. She dropped her coffee cup, the liquid spilling across the floor, but she didn't notice. What do you mean?" she stammered, clutching the phone tighter. "She's been found unresponsive at home. We need you to come down here right away." Her hands trembled as she hung up the phone, panic taking over. What had happened? Why wasn't Lily at school? She ran to the bedroom, frantically shaking Zach. Awake. He groggily tried to gather his thoughts, but his eyes were clouded with confusion, and Karen felt a deep pit form in her stomach. Something felt wrong. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. They rushed to the house where, Lily was found, but as they neared, the weight of the situation settled in. The flashing red and blue lights of the squad cars and ambulances seemed to blur together, their brightness a stark contrast to the dark reality ahead. Karen's breath caught as she saw the officers at the front door, their faces grim. She was led inside without a word. The air was thick with the kind of tension that settles when something irreparable has occurred. Lily's room was eerily still, the silence hanging over everything like a heavy shroud. Karen's eyes immediately went to her daughter's bed. Lily was lying there, her small body covered by a white sheet, but the way she lay there, so still, told Karen everything. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, unable to fathom the reality of it. She reached out to touch Lily's hand, but it was cold, stiff. Her breath hitched, the sobs coming in short gasps. "My baby, Karen whispered, as if her own voice could somehow bring Lily back. The officer took a step forward, holding a folder in his hands. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there are signs of severe trauma. We need to speak with you." The details came out slowly, one by. Lily had been dead for hours before anyone found her. The autopsy revealed what they had all feared. Her small body was covered in deep bite marks, bruises in varying stages of healing, and fractured ribs. She had been assaulted, physically and emotionally, for longer than anyone had known. There were marks on her arms that hadn't been noticed before, wounds that ran deeper than just the skin. It wasn't just a few scuffs or the accidental knocks from rough play. This was methodical, purposeful cruelty. Lily had been punished. She had been broken. And when she could no longer endure the pain, she had been left there to die. The investigation immediately shifted to Zach. When they questioned him, his lack of emotion was chilling. He claimed that Lily had been difficult, that she had refused to listen and had been acting out in the days leading up to her death. He said she was out of control and needed to be taught a lesson. He didn't seem to understand why they were so concerned. It took a few days for the authorities to piece together the full extent of the abuse. They uncovered more information about Zach's history, his past relationships, his lack of stability, and his unsettling behavior. Everything about him pointed to one horrifying truth. He had preyed on Karen's vulnerability, manipulated her trust, and ultimately broken her daughter. The community was in shock. Neighbors couldn't believe the news. They recalled the quiet, somewhat strange young man who had moved in with Karen just months ago, and the way he always seemed to keep a close eye on Lily. Many of them, like Karen, had brushed off their suspicions, convinced that it was just their imagination. But now they realized they had all missed something they could never undo. The worst part, however, was that it could have been prevented. So many signs had been ignored. So many moments when someone could have stepped in, when someone could have made a difference. But in the end, Lily was gone, and the people who should have protected her were left to live with the consequences of their silence. Karen's world, once consumed with the search for love and stability, was now a broken, fractured version of what it had been. And as she sat in the sterile interrogation room, waiting for answers, she couldn't help but wonder if she'd failed her daughter all along. The guilt gnawed at her, consuming her from the inside out. The courtroom was cold, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of what had happened. Karen sat at the back, her eyes red and swollen from endless nights of crying. She had barely eaten in days, her mind consumed by the loss of her daughter, the horrific details she had learned, and the guilt that gripped her heart. It felt surreal to be there, in the very place where Zach's fate would be decided. Her hands trembled as she clutched the tissue in her lap, the tightness in her chest threatening to suffocate her. Zach sat across from her, his posture straight, his eyes distant. He didn't seem to care about the weight of what he had done, nor did he seem to understand the devastation he had caused. His lawyer whispered in his ear, but he barely responded. He had the cold, calculating demeanor of someone who didn't understand the consequences of their actions. To him, this was just another chapter in his life, one he would somehow survive. The prosecutor went through the details of Lily's death, outlining the injuries, the signs of prolonged abuse, the bite marks, the bruises that covered her body. Every word hit Karen like a physical blow. She couldn't stop thinking about how her daughter had suffered, how Lily had been trapped in a world of terror and silence, and how she had been left to die at the hands of the one person Karen had trusted. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the images in her mind, but it didn't help. The reality was inescapable. Zach's defense team attempted to paint a different picture. They argued that Lily had been a troubled child, that her behavior had been increasingly erratic, and that Zach had simply lost control. They suggested that Karen had failed to provide the proper support and discipline, blaming her absence due to work and her focus on her relationship with Zach. It was a strategy to shift the blame, to paint Zach as a victim of circumstances. But Karen couldn't understand how anyone could believe it. Zach had been the adult. He had been the one in control, and he had used that power to hurt her daughter. The trial was filled with moments of anger and disbelief. Karen listened in, a daze as witnesses testified, each piece of evidence pointing to the same horrifying truth. Zach had been a monster hiding behind a mask of charm. He had manipulated everyone, Karen, the neighbors, the teachers, into believing that he was harmless, that he had good intentions. But in the quiet of their home, away from prying eyes, he had been something else entirely. The emotional toll of hearing it all laid bare in such a public way was overwhelming, but Karen knew she had to keep going, that Lily deserved justice, even if it was too late for her. Finally, the time came for Zach's sentencing. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, calm but firm, as he delivered his decision. Zach was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the weight of the sentence sank in. Zach's face remained unreadable, but Karen felt a flicker of something inside her, a small semblance of justice. It wouldn't bring Lily back, but at least he would never hurt anyone again. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but Karen didn't want to answer any of them. She didn't want the world to know her pain, her failure, her heartache. She just wanted to go home, to escape from the glare of the public eye and grieve in peace.